let's dive into the world of fashion. We're unpacking this awesome conversation from an English language learning podcast today.
Yeah.
And I know you might be thinking, English language learning, what's that got to do with fashion?
Yeah.
But honestly,
Right.
this conversation is packed with insights about how we see fashion, the words we use to talk about it, even how style changes between cultures. It's fascinating.
What's really cool is how this podcast uses humor to get these points across.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's sneaking in a lesson while you're laughing.
Totally.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how much we say through our clothes without realizing it.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, did you hear the husband describe his outfit?
Uh-huh.
Striped shirt, checkered sweater, lucky sandals.
Oh, yeah.
With shorts.
Oh, my goodness.
It's like he's trying to break every fashion rule at once.
Well, that's kind of the point, right? It's this over-the-top fashion faux pas
Yeah.
to really drive home the idea of fashion sense.
Or the lack thereof, I guess.
Or in this case, maybe the lack of it, yeah.
It makes you wonder, what even is fashion sense? Is it something you're born with, or can you learn it?
That's a great question.
Right.
I think it's a mix of things.
Okay.
It's understanding color, proportion, texture, but also knowing the trends and how to adapt them to your own style.
Like having an eye for what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And knowing how to express your personality through clothes.
Exactly. And it's not always about following rules either.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes breaking them can be stylish too, if it's intentional.
That reminds me, something else caught my ear.
Yeah.
The husband talking about the cut and hemline of his shorts. Interesting, because those words usually go with women's clothing.
Right.
Do you think there's something to him using that language?
I think it adds to his character.
Yeah.
By using terms we expect for women's clothes, the podcast subtly shows how clueless he is about fashion.
Yeah.
It's as if he's trying to use words he doesn't fully get for his own style.
That's such a sharp observation.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much these word choices can convey.
Language is fascinating, especially for something visual like fashion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the husband's, let's say, unique sense of style.
Right.
But what about his wife's suggestion? Silk tie, corduroy pants, and a coat.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder, is that really right for a dinner party?
Well, if we think about the context,
Okay.
it probably takes place in winter.
Yeah,
So corduroy pants and a coat makes sense.
makes sense.
And of course, silk tie is classic for formal events like dinner.
Right, so it's actually practical A&D stylish.
Yeah.
I'm also really drawn to how this podcast brings up runway fashion
Uh-huh.
and how it affects everyday trends.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Runway shows are often seen as these extravagant things, but they really shape what we see in stores and ultimately what we wear.
It's like a trickle down. Those over-the-top designs become wearable.
Right.
Have you ever noticed that yourself?
Yeah.
Spot a trend and think, hey, I saw that on the runway.
Absolutely. It's so cool how designers take inspiration from art, culture,
Yeah.
even social movements, and put it into clothes. Runway's a place to experiment, push boundaries, and those ideas often end up in the mainstream.
So it's not copying runway looks exactly.
No.
It's more taking elements like colors, silhouettes, textures,
Exactly.
and using them in our own way.
It's about taking inspiration and making it your own.
I like that.
Yeah.
The podcast mentions Italian fashion, good example of this.
Yeah.
Oh, you've lived in Italy, right?
I have.
What's your take on Italian style?
What else?
Is it as bold and out there as runway stuff?
I'd say while Italy is a fashion capital,
Yeah.
the style is more understated elegance, not so much of the drama of the runway.
Okay.
Italian designers are known for amazing craftsmanship, luxurious fabrics, and timeless silhouettes.
I can see that.
Think Armani, Valentino, Prada, they
Yeah.
all have this sophisticated simplicity.
So less about trends, more about pieces that last and always look good. Exactly. Quality over quantity.
Yeah,
That's something I really appreciate about Italian fashion.
makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about a personal style that's beyond those fleeting trends. Speaking of different fashion cultures,
Yeah.
the podcast also mentions Japan and South Korea. Really unique styles.
Absolutely.
Sometimes even pushing what we think of as fashion.
They both have amazing street style scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Mix of traditional and modern.
I've seen pictures. It's so cool.
Like Harajuku in Japan, known for its colorful and eclectic fashion.
Oh, yeah.
People expressing themselves through bold outfits,
Yeah.
often inspired by anime, manga, music.
It's so expressive.
It is.
Oh, and speaking of bold,
Yeah.
The podcast told that funny story about platform shoes in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see anything like that traveling?
Oh, yeah. It's quite a sight.
I bet.
Platform shoes, often with kawaii or cute looks, popular among young women there.
Yeah.
They really go for height, make a statement with their shoes. It definitely challenges what we in the West think is stylish or even practical.
Yeah.
Imagine navigating a busy train station in those.
Right. It shows their commitment to their style.
Definitely.
And it brings up a good point. Being fashionable doesn't have to be expensive.
Oh, that's so important.
Yeah, you don't need designer everything to have good style.
Absolutely.
It's about finding your aesthetic and expressing it creatively.
Yeah.
There are so many options. Thrifting, DIY, mixing high street with vintage.
Love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of affordable options, I laughed when the podcast mentioned buying fake designer stuff at markets.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been tempted by those knockoffs?
I think we all have, right? Designers look for way less.
Yeah.
But it brings up tough questions about ethical consumption and the
Yeah.
impact on the fashion industry.
It's complicated, isn't it?
It is.
On one hand, it's a way to try those expensive trends.
Right.
But on the other, it's supporting an industry that copies others' designs.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately the podcast is highlighting something much better.
What's that?
Developing your own unique style instead of chasing trends or imitating others.
That's what makes fashion so interesting, right?
Exactly.
It shows the world who you are, what you value, how you see yourself.
It's self-expression beyond just clothes.
Yeah.
It's a visual representation of your personality.
I love that.
Yeah.
So after this deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What should they think about when they get dressed?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of personal style.
Okay.
It's not about trends or fitting in.
Yeah.
It's about what you like, what makes you feel good, and what represents you as an individual.
Like fashion's a language, and we're all learning to speak it in our own way.
Exactly.
Some are fluent, others still figuring out the grammar.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to experiment and find what works for you.
Absolutely. And the beauty is there's no one right answer.
Right.
What works for one might not for another, and that's okay.
So ditch the magazines, wear whatever we want.
Not quite. Embracing your individuality is great,
Okay.
but knowing some basic fashion principles can elevate your style.
Like what?
Things like knowing your body type, understanding color palettes, recognizing fabrics, textures.
Yeah.
Those help you make better choices.
It's like anything else. The more you learn, the better your decisions.
Exactly.
And this conversation really showed how fashion reflects more than just clothes.
Yeah.
It can show different cultures, social movements, even our own values.
Absolutely. It can be self-expression and a way to connect with others.
Who share similar tastes. Yeah.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
It has.
We've looked at funny fashion faux pas, cultural styles, even ethical choices.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we learn about ourselves and the world through what we wear.
It's a reminder that fashion's more than just surface level.
I agree.
It's always changing, reflecting who we are and what we stand for.
Well said. Seems like the best way is to embrace that individuality, have fun, experiment, and not take it too seriously.
I couldn't agree more.
Fashion should be enjoyable, empowering, and show our true selves.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into fashion.
Okay.
Huge thank you to our expert for the insights.
My pleasure.
And to you, our listener, for joining us.
Yeah.
We hope you're inspired to explore your own style and keep seeing how fashion shapes our world.
It's everywhere.
Until next time, stay curious and keep on diving.
Great. See you then.
Hey,
Not as bold. No,
Okay.
more about that timeless chic.
I see.
Yeah.
It's about a style that goes beyond trends.
Exactly.
Speaking of different fashion cultures,
Yeah.
the podcast mentions Japan and South Korea having really unique styles.
Absolutely.
Sometimes even pushing what we even consider fashion.
Yeah, they both have these vibrant street-style scenes.
Right.
You see a mix of traditional elements and modern interpretations.
I've seen pictures. So cool.
Like Harajuku in Japan.
Oh, yeah. How are you?
It's known for its colorful and eclectic fashion subcultures,
Yeah.
where people express themselves through these bold outfits, often inspired by anime, manga, and music.
Oh, and speaking of bold,
Uh-huh.
the the podcast told that hilarious anecdote about platform shoes in Japan.
Oh, yeah, those platform shoes.
Did you ever see anything like that when you were traveling?
I did, yeah.
I bet.
It's quite a sight.
I can imagine.
Platform shoes, often paired with like the whole kawaii or cute aesthetic.
Right.
Really popular trend, especially among young women there.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to experiment with height and make a statement with their footwear.
It really challenges what we in the West think is stylish.
Yeah.
Or even practical, for that matter.
Right.
Imagine, like, navigating a crowded train station in those.
Yeah, exactly. It's a testament to their commitment to their personal style, though.
Oh, for sure.
And it brings up an interesting point. You know, being fashionable doesn't have to be expensive.
That's a great point.
You don't need a closet full of designer labels to have good style.
Absolutely not.
It's about finding your own aesthetic and expressing it in creative ways.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many options.
Yeah.
Thrifting, DIY, even mixing and matching high street finds with vintage pieces.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of affordable options,
Yeah.
I couldn't help but chuckle when the podcast suggested buying fake designer goods at markets.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been tempted by those knockoff handbags or sneakers?
I think we've all been there, enticed by that designer, look for a fraction of the price.
Totally.
But it does bring up some complex questions about ethical consumption and the impact on the industry as a whole.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
It is.
On one hand, it feels like a way to participate in those high-end trends,
Right.
but without the hefty price tag.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're supporting an industry that profits from copying other people's designs.
It's a tricky balance for sure.
It.
And I think ultimately the podcast conversation is highlighting a much more valuable approach to fashion.
Yeah, what's the...
Developing your own unique sense of style rather than blindly chasing trends or trying to imitate someone else.
That's what makes fashion so interesting.
It is, yeah.
It's a way to show the world who you are, what you value,
Mhm.
how you see yourself.
It's a form of self-expression that goes beyond just wearing clothes.
Yeah,
It's about creating a visual representation of your personality.
I love that.
Yeah.
So after diving deep into this conversation, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about when they get dressed in the morning?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that it's about the power of personal style.
Okay.
It's not just about, following every trend
Right.
or trying to fit into some mold.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what you like,
Mm-hmm.
what makes you feel good,
Makes sense.
what represents you as a person.
It's like fashion is this language.
Yeah.
We're all learning to speak it our own way.
It's exactly.
Some are fluent.
Yeah.
Some are still working on the grammar and vocab, so to speak.
Right.
But the important part is to keep experimenting, find what works.
Absolutely.
So are you saying ditch the magazines, wear whatever?
Not exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Embracing your individuality is fantastic,
Yeah.
but understanding some fashion basics can really make your style better.
Like what kind of basics?
Things like knowing your body type,
Okay.
understanding color palettes, recognizing different fabrics and textures.
Ah, interesting.
Those are all tools to help you make smarter choices.
So like anything, the more you learn,
Right.
the better your decisions.
Exactly.
And this conversation really showed us how fashion reflects more than just clothes.
It does.
It can be a window into different cultures,
Mhm.
social movements, even our own values.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Fashion can be such a powerful way to express yourself
It is.
and a way to connect with people who get you, who have similar tastes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
it has been.
We've explored the funny side of fashion faux pas,
Mm-hmm.
the cultural differences in style, even the ethics of our choices.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we learn about ourselves and the world
I know, right?
just by looking closer at what we wear.
It's a reminder that fashion isn't just surface level.
No, it's not.
It's constantly changing, reflecting who we are and what we believe in.
Well said.
It seems like the best approach is to embrace that individual style.
Yeah.
Have fun with it, experiment,
Mm-hmm.
but not take it too seriously.
I completely agree.
Fashion should be something we enjoy, something empowering,
It should.
and most of all, it should let us be our true selves.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the incredible world of fashion.
Sounds good.
A huge thank you to our expert for all the insights today.
You're welcome. It was fun.
And to you, our amazing listener, for joining us on this journey.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope you're inspired to explore your own personal style.
Yeah, find what makes you feel good.
And to keep noticing how fashion shapes the world around us.
It really does.
Until next time, stay curious and keep on diving.